My problems first started, it was probably about 2014. Me and my ex-wife, we tried to start a business. And, there was a lot of things going into that business. It was a juice truck business in Hamilton, Ontario. And there's, like I said, a lot of different things that were going on. And we kind of got screwed over with our truck that we purchased for the juice business, which in turn kind of lost everything that we had. So we lost our house, lost a couple vehicles, and it was almost a breakdown in the marriage at that point. We decided to move to an old neighborhood that I used to live in when I was growing up and start over. So, I found another job, and I was working a lot of hours for quite a while, and there was a lot of complaining about the hours that I was working, and my ex-wife had a pretty good relationship with my mother, so I was hearing a lot of things from my mother about what was her problem with me working all these hours. And it was back in March of 2017 that I decided to walk away from our marriage. And I was seeing somebody that we mutually knew. Now, that didn't really create a huge problem at the time, but obviously there was a lot of jealousy there, and we did try to work things out 5 months down the road, but it was right back to the same routine that I walked away from. So this went on for about a year, 2 years, and I had a breakdown in that relationship. And at that time, it was July of 2019. As soon as my ex-wife found out that I had broken up with that woman, she tried to be my best friend. I was getting a lot of texts from her, and I kind of figured that it's to me it sounded like she was trying to get back together, which was not my intention. I was trying to create a better relationship with her because of my children. So we decided at that point that we would try and do what's best for our kids. And I was friendly with her boyfriend, who she's still with. And me and this woman got back together. Now, when we got back together, it was actually my youngest daughter that told my ex-wife that we were back together, and that's where my problems started. There was a lot of hate. I was getting a lot of messages from her that were not appropriate. And in August of 2019 was the last time that I seen my children. Prior to this, we had 50-50 custody, and to be honest, I had majority custody. There was many times where I had my kids for months on end. My ex-wife has a lot of health issues and was in and out of the hospital with certain surgeries, back surgeries, hip surgeries. There's a lot of different health issues that she had. So I always stepped up to the plate and took care of my kids. And it was the last day that I seen my children in my care was August 2nd of 2019. And it's a day I'll never forget. I had a doctor's appointment that day myself, and my ex-wife does not drive, so I was waiting for one of her friends to come and pick up my kids, and she was late. I wasn't getting any answers. And I finally, about an hour after she was supposed to pick them up, she responded by saying that her friend would be picking them up in front of my apartment and to have them ready. So I did just that. Like I said, we had 50-50 custody, so for 3 days I'd have them, or 3.5 days I would have them, 3.5 days she would have them. And on August 6th is when everything happened the way that it happened, and that's why I'm sitting here today. And then, again, that's another day I'll never forget. Again, I was supposed to pick up my kids that day after school. Sorry, it wouldn't have been after school. It was around 3 o'clock that I was supposed to pick them up, and I wasn't getting any answers. And I had texted her earlier that day to find out what time I can go get them, if it was going to be the regular 2 or 3 o'clock, or if I could go get them earlier. I didn't receive any response. I sent a few messages that day without any response from her, other than around lunchtime I received a text message that asked me to meet her at the family courthouse. Right then and there I knew that she was up to something, and what she was up to was probably not good. I do have experience in law. I've studied law. I've taken a paralegal course. I've taken a private investigator's course. So I knew that there was something that was going to happen that day, and it was not going to be good. I responded with actually what time or when that she wanted me at the courthouse, and I didn't receive a response. At around 5 o'clock that evening, I got a knock on my apartment door from a special constable from the courthouse, which was serving me documents. Now, I wouldn't have ever expected what was coming in those documents. I kind of figured it was just, divorce papers and whatnot, because we hadn't done any of that process yet. When I opened up the envelope, I'd found out that I was being accused of sexual assault on my daughter, sexual assault on my ex-wife, sexual assault on one of her friends, as well as assault on my ex-wife throughout our marriage. I sunk to the ground. I dropped to the ground that day because I knew that at the time I thought that my life was over. And like I said, I've had these experiences before working in that profession. I worked at a family law office that they only dealt with these things. I served these documents to many, many divorced parents. So I knew. So it was an emergency protection order. So that, again, that was the last time that I was able to see my kids. I was not allowed to go to their school. I was not allowed to go to her, some of her friends' places that may have been watching my kids. I wasn't allowed to contact my ex-wife. And, it was a slap in the face, and it truly was. My charges actually didn't start right away. What they did is, because my ex-wife accused me of sexually assaulting our daughter, the police were looking into that immediately, which I agreed with because it was untrue. So I wanted to know how this came about. And it all started with a diary, apparently, that my ex-wife found underneath my daughter's bed. This diary wasn't in words, it was mainly pictures. My daughter is very artistic and creative, and she had used these drawings in a twisted way to try and prove that I had sexually assaulted her. I was living in my own apartment at that time. I was not living in the house at all. I've never actually spent a day in jail. And I think it only had to do with the overwhelming amount of evidence that I had towards her, and the knowledge that I had because of it. And like I said, there was a lot of different accusations, and I was actually serving my ex-wife the day that I got arrested. I was literally serving her at the family courthouse. Her lawyer's office was literally right across the street, and I received a phone call, which was a private number, which was the police at my apartment at that time. I had actually told them that I was serving documents at the time, and that I would meet them at the police station. And I did just that. I walked into the police station. I presented who I was and the reason why I was there. 2 police officers came to the lobby of the police station. They did not put handcuffs on me, and they took me down to a holding area, which I waived my right to a lawyer, and I just basically told my side of what was going on at that time. They allowed me to kind of explain how this happened, and the police officer that I was speaking with was kind of dumbfounded by it. I was there a week prior because of the allegations with my ex-wife had brought up against my daughter, which did not stand. And my ex-wife was very, very angry that I did not get arrested that day. She stormed out. It's like an interview room. I wouldn't say that it was a cell. It was basically an interview room. There wasn't much in that room. Like I said, I had no idea what was really going to happen, but I just basically told my side of the story. I was arrested that day after I had given my side of the story because of the severity of the allegations and the way that the system looks at men in these situations. I was arrested. I was given a whole bunch of paperwork that day. I was given everything basically, going in for fingerprints. I even got the paperwork for registering as a sex offender, which was a huge blow because I didn't commit these crimes. I don't believe that they can do that, but it was given to me that day. It was a scare tactic to try and see if I would break. I think the reason why that they allowed me to leave is because there was a lot of details in my ex-wife's statement that were questionable at first. There was a lot of dates that didn't make any sense, and there was a lot of information that was given to them that they obviously needed to hear both sides, and I believe that that's why I wasn't handcuffed or spent any time in a cell. Afterwards, then once the Crown Attorney's Office actually received the file, then I had a Crown Attorney that was new and that wanted to make a name for herself basically. And again, with all the misinformation and the dates that were screwed up, I always thought that this should be dropped, but it was not, and it kept going and kept going and kept going. At first, like I said, I refused to hire a lawyer. I went to two court dates for the criminal charges at the John Sapinka Courthouse in Hamilton, refusing to have a lawyer. At that point, I was told by the Crown Attorney's Office that is not possible and that I would have to hire a lawyer. So I went ahead and I got a legal aid certificate in order to do that. I didn't believe that I should have to have a lawyer. I felt that I could. I'm not saying that I know everything, but I would just wanted to tell my side and to present a lot because I had saved a lot of this evidence. Like I said, me and my ex-wife, we tried to start a juice business, and we were kind of in that public eye already because I had lost 160 pounds from juicing, and my ex-wife lost a lot of weight from juicing, just drinking fresh fruits and vegetables. So we had a lot of stories already out there, which I had always saved, and I had a lot of my ex-wife stuff still that was on my laptop. So, I felt that I could present all this information to a Crown attorney and try and settle this without having to go through any type of trial or the delayed process that everybody else has to go through. And I ended up having to get a legal aid lawyer. It wasn't actually that bad. My legal aid lawyer was not the greatest lawyer, I'm going to be honest, but he did allow me to work on the case. The first thing that he said is that I'm not going to be able to do what a lawyer does if you're going to pay them, where I didn't have any money at that time. I was basically a single father trying to manage my two kids at that time, and it was a drawn-out process. But like I said, I had all this information and all this evidence that I thought that once they read all of this and once they get all this information, the truth is going to come out on why this happened. The EPO that I actually had was an indefinite EPO, so there was no dates on it. I had an EPO in the criminal court system, and I also had an EPO in the family court system, and both of them, they did not have dates on it, so they could just continue as long as the process was. But I did have direct contact with the Crown Attorney's office because I had so much evidence to me proving that these things didn't happen. And so because my lawyer was a legal aid lawyer, and like I said, he wasn't the greatest lawyer. He was a good guy though, but he didn't have that oomph that I needed at that time. So I kind of pushed for myself to be able to do these things, which then I was able to get access to the Crown Attorney's office, and I presented a lot of my own evidence to the Crown Attorney directly. Because of the COVID pandemic, everything started getting delayed. I wasn't getting responses from the Crown Attorney's office because they weren't even in the offices sometimes. So, but they kept pushing it, and it was, I believe that they set a trial date finally, and we were about to give our pre-trial evidence. And I came across a recording from one of the accusers, her friend. I came across a recording online that actually dealt with a lot of what we're talking about with sexual assault. Basically, it was a recording a podcast recording that this person had done about sexual assault, and it was a week prior to when I was accused of all of these things from this person, my ex-wife. So I presented that to the Crown Attorney's office because my name was never mentioned in this podcast at all. None of the details were ever mentioned in this podcast. And the only time that this person ever mentioned being sexually assaulted was once. And this person was not me. So I presented this to the Crown Attorney's office. I presented the link to the Crown Attorney's office. I cut out the recording. I sent it all to them. I transcribed the recording as well, sent it to them. And that's when things started to go into my favor. Because the Crown Attorney's office at that point 100% knew that they had no case. And I was trying to tell them that I do not want my children to have to go through a trial, which to me does not have to happen. We see it too often where, children are destroyed because they have to watch a parent go through this, and whether or not they're found guilty or they're innocent, they still have the horrors of what they've gone through, and I didn't want that for my kids. I was never actually charged with the sexual assault on my daughter. Like I said, they knew exactly what that was not true, and like I said, she was very angry at that time. But I did get charged. I had 5 charges at the time. Then it was about 6 months later, I got a call from my lawyer stating that I had now been charged with 2 counts of animal cruelty, and I could not. I couldn't figure out why that it was animal cruelty. If anybody that knows me personally knows that I'm a huge dog lover, and dogs gravitate towards me. I did have a dog at that time, and I had a cat, 2 cats at that time when I was with my ex-wife. The story was that I took a 2x4 and I broke the cat's back, and my lawyer knew right away that it was obviously, it was a tactic. And he told me at that time that, a lot of these cases, they try and make you look like an absolute monster. And he said, to me, there's nothing worse that if you're going to be in a trial and you're going to have a jury sitting there, there's nothing worse than animal abuse on top of what I had already been accused of. So he said, this is a ploy that they use. I was never arrested for these things as well. They were just tacked on to what I'd already have at the time. And, so that brought up the tally to now 8 different allegations instead of just 6. I've talked with many fathers over the years, and they've said the same thing. She's accused me of this and that, and and she's saying that I, did this to the dog, the family dog, and I did this, and I understand it because I went through the same thing. When I got back with my ex-wife, it was only like about 5 months after all of this, like when we first split up. About 5 months after, we decided we'd try and work it out, and it lasted only 5 days. But how that even started was that we had to put down our family cat. And, she had cancer, and the lump was getting bigger. She was in a lot of pain. So, we had to put her down, and I went with my ex-wife to do that. And it was emotional because, that cat has been around as long as I was there. And my daughter was especially close with that cat. And I always felt that, it was again poking the bear and, using something against me that, I like animals, and kind of using that against me to twist it into try and favor her story at the time, which there was a lot of people that they just knew that there's no way. There's absolutely no way that happened. The effect that it had on my work life, I couldn't work because, I was under a lot, like I was depressed. I was very depressed. I had a lot of anger, and like I said, I had a lawyer that was a legal aid lawyer that wasn't very good. So I had to, in my eyes, work as much as possible that I could on my own case. Because I felt that if I didn't, the Crown Attorney at that time was seeking 6 years in jail for stuff that I didn't do. And I didn't want to go to jail at that time. And I don't think anybody wants to go to jail. So, it completely affected that. My family, the exact same thing. A lot of my family, I've had family problems in the past because of some stuff that I went through when I was a child. And, again, my ex-wife had kind of used that against me. She totally used it against me and manipulated a lot of my family, in the sense that, she tried to be that victim. Even my own mother, at that time, I had no choice but to move in with my mom. I couldn't afford my apartment anymore because I didn't have my kids anymore. So I had to move in with my mother. When it first started, I did have supervised access, which my ex-wife would only allow my mother to be the supervisor. She wouldn't allow my girlfriend to be the supervisor, even though my girlfriend at the time watched my kids all the time. My ex-wife never had any issues with her, but because of all the jealousy and subsequently the charges that she laid against me, the only option was my mother. So again, me and my mother, we didn't have the greatest relationship, but you're thinking that this is your mom and she'll help you out at this point. I had found out that my mom has alcohol problems as well as her boyfriend, and it was always a concern of mine because of going into this. I have CAS involved, I have the Office of the Children's Lawyers involved, and I didn't want that anyways for my kids. I don't want my kids around any of that. And it was a straight up refusal for my mother to change that. So I had to make that tough decision, and I went to the courthouse and asked them not to have her as a supervisor, which I had to sacrifice my time with my kids. My ex-wife was calling my mother a lot behind my back. My mother was then going to my ex-wife's house to see my children, but I couldn't see my children, which caused a lot of conflict. And then my brother went through a very similar situation that I went through at that time, and I tried to be supportive of that as well. But again, there's even though he wasn't guilty of it, they were taking the wrong steps in order to try and prove that by hiding a lot of things. I'd already explained that my mother's my mother was an alcoholic, and when I had CAS at her apartment to look it over, they obviously noticed that there was a lot of cases of beer there, and the house was not clean at all. They smoked in the house, and to me, it just wasn't an atmosphere for kids to be in, especially in that situation. When my brother went through this situation, they tried to cover all that up by removing all those things, painting the apartment, hiding text messages and whatnot. So, and I didn't agree with that. I stood up from the get-go from this because it wasn't right, and I made a promise to my kids that I would make this right. And I felt that at that time, my own brother should have seen that. So it created a lot of conflict, which at that point, I became homeless. I lived in a tent for a few months in February and in March. It was very cold, and it wasn't pleasant at all. But I still, tried to help others during all of this process as well, because I knew exactly what all these people that I spoke with were going through, because I went through the exact same things. So I created a Father's Truth very, very quickly after all of this started, because of the experience that I've had, and I've seen this happen to many, many people prior to all of this. That I created a venue so that people could, they would know that they're not alone. And I presented facts about how the court system treats people in these situations, and I received a lot of feedback from it that people thought that they were alone, and instead of them thinking that they're alone, they hearing some of my story, they knew that they weren't. And I spoke with probably 1,000 parents over these last 3 years about the family court system, and about what they go through, and even the depression and the mental status that they have going through all of these things, and the loss that they feel. And it was heartbreaking for me, because I was going through these things too. But I realized too that this is a major problem, not just in Canada, but in the United States, the United Kingdom, Italy, Ireland. I've spoken with people all over the world that tell me that they go through these same things, and their court systems treat them the exact same way. For me, though, that was a sacrifice that I had to make, and not everybody would do exactly what I would do, and I understand that. I'm a tough guy. I went through a lot of stuff when I was a kid, and I kind of went back to where it was a safe place for me at that time. It was a safe place that I knew that I would be safe there. And even though it was hell going through it, I knew that I'd be safe there, or at least I thought that I would be safe on a certain level. Like I said, my brother had gone through a lot of things, and I won't get into all the details about his case, but my brother did go through some things, and I did try and help him out, and unfortunately it didn't work out the way that I hoped that it would work out. And I actually did an interview in Toronto about kind of about this, but a lot about mental health, that how people react to certain things, that when they're accused of these things, how that people react. And I thought that at that time that I was a stronger person. And then, then it was literally the very next day that my brother had an episode that kind of opened my eyes to things. And I realized that, this could happen to really anybody. And while I was homeless, I have no problem sharing this, that, I became very depressed. It was a very dark place to be in. And because of the cold and everything, I was starting to get hypothermia, and I was starting to hallucinate a lot. And I didn't want to live like that anymore. And I did try and commit suicide. And there was something. It's very hard to explain because I feel that there was something that was stopping me. That it's not over, and you can do this. You have that power that you can take back this control. You just have to dig deep. And ever since that moment, I try to live in that present moment instead of trying to worry about the past or worrying about the future. I just try to live in that present moment. And I've talked with a lot of parents that have gone through these things, and some of them haven't made it. And it's heartbreaking when you hear stuff like that, because you also know that you were in that situation as well, but you're still here and they're not. So it's a very tough thing to go through. The loss that you're going to experience, the loss of jobs, the loss of friends, the loss of family, and some ultimately lose their life because of it. It's a very tough thing to go through. And I still have not seen my children. The only time I've ever actually seen my kids was for interviews for the Office of the Children's Lawyer, and that was in June or July of 2020, and then again last year for my final interview for the Office of the Children's Lawyer in July of 2021. I was exonerated. December 18th of 2020 is when I was given the word from the Crown Attorney's Office that that's what would be happening. But there was still, again, a process that had to be done. And I finalized all of that in April of 2021. So it's been, 2020. So it's been just over almost 2 years now that I was exonerated. But again, it's that whole process that, and the loss. Basically everything that I had was taken away from me. And for me, my main thing was my kids. I'm not a materialistic person whatsoever, so I don't really care about the materialistic things like, video games and all this other stuff. I knew that those things you can regain, but I couldn't just make new kids and be like they were. They're my flesh and blood. So yeah, I had to pack up and move. So throughout all this process, it was still ongoing at the time that I decided that I have to get out of here. I was working with somebody at the time that actually gave me some information that there was a threat on my life, and it got to that point where I didn't want my kids to have to go through something like that, and if I could do something about it, I would. So I packed up from Hamilton, Ontario, and I moved to Ingleside, Ontario, which is 500 kilometers away, which was about 20 kilometers from where I grew up in Cornwall, Ontario when I was young. I came down, I stayed with some friends for a few days, and then I got my own place for 5 months. And, again, just tried to work on myself and try and get away from the stresses that you go through when you go through this process. And again, with the exoneration and everything, everything was still with the pandemic and everything, the lockdowns that we've had in Ontario. I decided, it's gone on too long, and I just tried to move on with my life, but I still have access to talk to my kids. I speak with them 3 times a week through FaceTime. I've seen, I've always noticed a difference that especially with my son. My son was very close with me, and I've noticed a difference in him because of the time that's gone on. And kids don't understand, obviously, all the process that has gone on. At least in my case, a lot of it's being not told to them. So, it's still tough. It is, but I still have hope that one day, going back to family court, now with all the, because I have still not been to family court yet, and that is partially to do with my own doing. You know, like I said, I tried to move here, start over, got a job, and you know, it's a tough thing because I've talked with, again, many different parents that have had to do the exact same thing. Is that, you know, they couldn't be in that situation anymore. Either they couldn't afford it, or they had to go and move with somebody else just so that they had a roof over their head, and then it's hard to get back. 100%, I would say that the courts are interfering with that, because I had the Office of the Children's Lawyer involved. And again, I only wanted the truth to come out, and you know, I figured that would be my best route, is to have the Office of the Children's Lawyer involved. And you know, for the first part of that whole investigation with the Office of the Children's Lawyer, their focus was on the allegations and the monster that they were trying to portray me as. But as soon as that I was exonerated, their focus then shifted to the fact that I was an advocate for fathers that go through all of this. And you know, now they say that I'm a threat to my kids because of the stuff that I've put out there. And if my children had ever seen that, you know, they may get bullied, or you know, they may have problems because of it. It was just a shift of focus, because they couldn't try and make their case, which was to try and make me a monster. And once I was exonerated, you know, like I said, that whole thing shifted to, well, you're a father's rights advocate, or you're a family law reform advocate, so you know, we're going to now pin that on you because you're fighting against us. It's definitely hard to try and get ahead after going through this. Like I said, I've lost everything. So, you know, going into this and being such a high conflict case that it was, you know, I even though I do have the experience, I know that I'm not able to get back what I lost. And it was never about that. And like I said, the materialistic things don't bother me. It was, you know, getting back to that 50-50 where it should be that in the first place. And I had to make that decision, you know, that, you know, do I stay here, or do I go back there and possibly go through the exact same things? Or do I stay here and try and get myself established, because that's what they put you in that position. They force that on you, that they're going to try and break you, or they're going to make you change your whole lifestyle. And that's what I had to do, is I had to change my whole lifestyle as to what do I think is more important. Do I think that, you know, being the advocate and having that angry attitude, or do I think that, you know, it's better to try and be positive about things, try and regain some of the things that I lost, and then as time goes on and my kids unfortunately have to get a little bit older, they can make their own decisions at that point in time. And it's unfortunate that it had to get to that point, because that's what the court system made me do. I didn't choose this. I didn't choose to be an advocate, but I didn't want anybody else to have to go through this. And you know, if there's not somebody out there that uses their voice against these things, then these things will just continue, and there'll be more guys like me, or even mothers like me, that, you know, go through these things and they don't know what to do. They think that it is the end. So, and that's what the court system does to you, is they push you, they try and break you. So, you know, and again, it's all about money. So, you know, again, I had to start over. I had a broken down vehicle in the first place, so, you know, I had to turn around, buy another vehicle. I'm working. I'm just trying to regain some of that, and you know, again, they even though I was exonerated and everything, that's still in the back of your mind, and it's never going to go away. It never will. But I had to try and take a more positive approach to it. I've had a lot of women, even, a lot of women that have reached out to me on my page, and friends of friends that, that have said, I don't understand, what you're going through and everything. But what I do understand is that, I understand why fathers get the shaft in all of this. And they go through these things, they see that their partners are going through this, or they're even, their parents may have gone through this, and they realize what's going on. But again, there's not a lot of venues for men to go through. There's tons of women's shelters, that women can go to in abusive relationships, or, when they lose everything because of what I've had to go through. But there's not very many men's shelters. I've even got turned away from men's shelters before I had to go homeless. I got turned away from them because there wasn't enough space, for one, or they're just non-existent. So that's always a question that's always asked of me, is that, how do you get through it? How do you do? And it's how I got through it was I tried to help others, and I talked with a lot of people. I got a lot of good friendships out of this, lifelong friendships now, a lot of respect out of what I've gone through and how I was able to overcome a lot of these things. And I have a lot of respect for others that have gone through this. And it's, it's just the type of person that I am. I didn't want this to have to go this far, but it had gone on this far. And there was many times where I thought that maybe I could just walk away from the advocacy part of it. But to be truly honest, I don't think I can, because I don't think that there's enough of us out there that, use their voice, because you're in a fear state as soon as you are in the family court system, especially, that they place that fear on you that if you do speak, you'll never see your kids again. And I do get that, because I go through that now. And I still do have a little bit of fear from, going back to court, because I already know what's going to happen, is that they're going to use now the advocacy part of it, because they cannot use the false allegations part of it, because I was exonerated and they're not allowed to use that against me. But, it's just a tough thing to have to go through, that, there's many people out there that they want to tell their side of the story. And I've spoken with plenty of them, but they can't go public with it, or they can't even post about it on Facebook, because, they're afraid that either their ex is going to see it, or somebody's friend is going to see it, or a lawyer might see it, and it'll 100% be used against you as soon as the next time you go through that courtroom door. It'll be used against you. So, there's a lot of fear that is instilled when you are in these situations. A lot of the allegations that were used against me, especially the one with my daughter, and in particular the sexual assault, to me was done to do one of two things: to either have me break to the point where I would commit suicide, or to have me do what I did, was to move away. And the reason why that I say that is because I went through a lot of things when I was a young child. And the only person that actually knew everything that I had gone through was my ex-wife. I confided in her when I first met her. It took me 20 years in order to come out and say that I was sexually assaulted by a family member. And, at that time, that was 2007. I was 27 years old, and I got all of my family together and, finally told them what happened, because I found that it was playing a huge role in the relationships that I was having up until that point. That, especially with the intimacy part. So I had told my family about that at that time, and they were not supportive. they acted like that they were supportive, but my family is that type of family that wanted to sweep everything under the rug. They had already known about a lot of the sexual assaults that had happened with other family members, but as soon as that I brought to their attention that it happened to me as well, they wanted to sweep that under the rug. I was told one day that they were going to be supportive and they were going to help me and they would get me some counseling and whatever, and then literally the very next day nobody was answering their phones. So at that point in time, I took it upon myself and I went and got my own counseling, and it truly helped me at that time. And that's when I decided, I think I'm going to move back to Hamilton, and was kind of talking with my ex-wife at the time. We had gone to high school together, so I decided to do that. And when I got to Hamilton, I told her everything. And obviously being in a relationship, we were in a relationship from 2008 until 2017, so nearly 10 years of knowing a person. They know a lot about what you've gone through in different stages of your life, and especially my ex-wife. I didn't hide anything. And when she did all of this in 2019, I thought that that was definitely, she definitely used my past and some of the heartache that I had to go through to get really to get back at me for leaving her, and again trying to push me over that edge. The good thing about it is that I was able to get over that many years ago, but I still knew that this is probably the reason why that this, especially the sexual assault, came into play. The other things I could deal with. I've never ever hit a woman in my life, and she would be the only person that would 100% truly know that, because like I said, I confided in her with everything. So that to me was a huge tactic that she tried to use against me by doing her own research on what you can do to immediately gain access, to immediately gain custody of the children in your family. And that's exactly what she did. It blew me away, to be honest. It did. It blew me away that she could pull those cards. I've always been interested in law. I've always, read about these things. I'm an avid reader, so I read a lot of different things. And like I said, I went to school to be a paralegal. I did private investigating, and she obviously knew that these things are out there and they work. So as much as it was a kick in the face that she did that, I just keep putting in the back of my mind that everything happens for a reason, and sometimes we don't know what those reasons are, and we don't agree with them, and they can play a toll on you. But I stuck to my truth throughout the whole process, and she didn't, and that was the huge difference, is that I did stick to my truth the whole time and she didn't. And again, with what she knew about my past and my childhood, it didn't work in her favor. And like I said, I did try and commit suicide, but again, there was something more, and I wasn't done. And that's why I share my story. I try and still help others, but I again had to try and move on from all of that as well, because I could not dwell in that, and I didn't want her to think that this is she's always going to win on that aspect. And for me, it's not about winning or losing, but in her sense, it was. And, you know, I just had to say, okay, well, you know, I know that these things do happen. I don't agree with them. I had a lot of anger. I had a lot of hate towards her in the beginning. I did have to let a lot of that go, though, because I didn't want to live like that. And I know that's the way that she wants me to live. And I just didn't want to do that anymore. So, you know, there's sacrifices that a person has to make in order to get through certain things. And I made a lot of sacrifices throughout the whole process. I still make sacrifices to this day. And I know that, you know, one day my kids will know the truth about everything that happened. It's all there. And I hope that, you know, they can understand some of the things that their father had to do. Because it wasn't easy. But I have faith that my kids will take after me and they will stand up for themselves because of it. So I can't be that person that has and holds all that anger in all the time. I had to release it. I had to gain back my freedom because of what happened. And, you know, we just have to continue on. You have to keep moving forward. So that's really all I can say about that. And, you know, again, I try every day to be a better person. I still talk to a lot of people because of it, but I have held back a lot, and I have kind of stepped away a little bit because I was more focused on, you know, trying to get my life back. And I feel that I have gotten my life back.